Maybe you've heard the story about the preacher who went to visit a lady early in the afternoon. The minister was in a bit of a hurry, didn't have time for lunch. Got there, the lady said, "Would you like to have a cup of tea?" And the minister said, "Certainly." He sat down in the living room, and she went to the kitchen to make some tea. And there on the coffee table in the living room, there was a bowl of nuts, peanuts, and, and he was hungry. So he just took one nut and he ate it, and the tea seemed to be taking a long time. And so he took another one, and before he realized it, all the nuts were gone. And so he felt really, really badly. And so I got to confess. So tea was served. They sat down. They began the tea, and he said to this wonderful lady, "I apologize. I missed lunch. I was in a hurry to get here. I didn't want to be late. You had some peanuts there, and I ate them all. I'm sorry." And she said, "Oh, that's okay. I forgot to throw those ones away. I only like the chocolate on the outsides of them." I don't know whether Jesus was in that mood. We're talking a little bit about Jesus the next little while. I want to just have you watch this little video. It's the introduction video that we have about what we're all about. And it really tries to help us to focus as a church and help people in the community to recognize that we focus on who Jesus was, trying to be imitators of Jesus. Hi, my name is Marty, and I'm the minister at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Kitchener, Ontario. Thank you for visiting us online. Maybe you're looking for a church, maybe you're struggling with some questions, maybe life is just hard and you're looking for some direction, a place to land, or just some inspiration. Here at St. Andrew's, we believe that everyone is looking for some meaning in their lives, and we find that meaning in a relationship with this guy called Jesus, who lived 2,000 years ago, but is still experienced today. He seemed to have a deep connection to God and to others, indeed to life itself. He went around breaking down barriers between people, creating healing where there was division, restoring people into relationships of care and justice and love. And somehow, in the mystery that is God, Jesus is still doing that today. We also recognize that so much meaning and peace is found in being Jesus to others, sharing the endless love that pours from Jesus into every person, regardless of race, creed, or gender identity. Being church is being called to serve each other, to serve the community, especially those in need. One of the stories of Jesus that precedes this passage that Barb read this morning is a very well-known story, the feeding of the 5,000. And I invite you to just go back there for a moment to that evening as people are finally heading home. And imagine that the excitement is still in the air, hanging on as the sun went down, settling over the hills in the distance, the sunset and the excitement framing groups of people as they headed home, their tummies filled as they broke off into small groups to chatter of the events that had occurred, still echoing in their conversation. Can you believe what just happened? Did you get enough to eat as well? It's amazing, wasn't it? How did all of this really happen? Is it real? Did we just experience that? Maybe some of the people who were at the very back of the crowds that Jesus fed that night with a simple meal from a young boy were asking more basic questions. Where did all the food come from? And others answering, well, it just started with a small meal. 5 loaves of bread, a couple of fish. Enough to feed 5,000 people? In some circles that night, There was talk about making Jesus king. If Jesus could fill their tummies, imagine what he could do. So astounded were they by what he was saying and what he was doing. They saw him as someone sent by God, the Messiah, the one that was promised. And it was at that point, John says, that Jesus withdrew from the crowd, went his own way. As soon as there was talk about making him king, he literally disappeared. Not even the disciples knew where he went. He caught up with them later on in the darkness, in the middle of the lake. But that's another story for another day. Getting back to the crowds, though, I think some of the people, perhaps even most of the people who are present here today, have the same kinds of questions that those people had back then. How is it possible? Did it really happen? Where did all that food come from? By the next morning, 2,000 years ago, however, the atmosphere had changed. It was colder somehow. The gospel writer, John, makes sure that we understand the change in temperature. Up to this point in the telling of the story of the feeding of the 5,000 in this, the 6th chapter of John's gospel, the people have always been referred to as the crowd. The crowd followed him. The crowd wanted to hear from him. The crowd stayed with him. The crowd were hungry as the supper hour approached. Jesus had compassion on the crowd. He told the disciples to feed the crowd. He took a small boy's meal and he fed the crowd so that all of their tummies were full. But the next morning, some in that crowd wanted to ask Jesus some hard questions. They went looking for Jesus and did not give up until they found him. Perhaps they were concerned that people wanted to make him king. Perhaps they were concerned about his increasing popularity. The gospel writer, John, refers to these members of the crowd who did not give up until they saw Jesus the next morning. He refers to them as the Jews. I've got to be careful there, because there is within John's gospel some anti-Semitism that we have to recognize and stop. It's perhaps better for us when John says the Jews to refer to the people who were struggling with what Jesus represented. Jesus represented a change. He represented kind of social upheaval. And there were people then, just like there are people today, who really struggle with that kind of change. John calls them the Jews, the leaders of the people. And the questions from them come fast and furious. Jesus, what did you mean that you are the bread come down from heaven? We know who you are. You are Joseph and Mary's son. That's who you are. How can you say that you have come down from heaven? And actually, when they're saying this, they're saying it in Jesus' presence without actually even talking to Jesus. They're talking as if Jesus were not present. They're talking in the third person. The temperature is very cold indeed. And I don't pretend to understand all that is happening there. The conflict between some of the leaders of the people and Jesus had been brewing for quite some time already. And it was getting very, very personal. But here's where I struggle with what we do with some of these passages. We complain about the arrogance of the church leaders back then. We want to defend Jesus. But then in our own arrogance, we think that we have to understand it all completely ourselves. And so we divide ourselves into those who think that this is what's happening and those who think that that's what's happening. And a lot of times It's around questions about who Jesus really is. Is Jesus truly sent from God? Is he the Son of God? Is he a prophet of God? Is Jesus God himself? Does Jesus think that he is God? Does Jesus know that he is God? Does the gospel writer think that Jesus is God? Does the gospel writer know that Jesus is God? There are volumes and volumes and volumes that are written around those questions. Sometimes I get frustrated because there is so much power in mystery. We don't have to understand it all. We don't have to be able to say this is exactly what happened. Because when we try to do that, sometimes we miss what Jesus is saying. We get so focused on all those details that we miss what Jesus is saying. For a moment, let's suspend the need to understand it all. I'm quite convinced none of us can anyhow. So let's just suspend that for a moment. And let's just think about what happened. The night before, as you recall, Jesus had compassion on the crowd. And as the story goes, he fed them. The next morning, in this conversation with the Jewish leaders, it's not that he discounts the miracle from the night before, but he does basically say, there's a whole lot more to life than just having your bellies filled. Yes, it's important to feed people. Yes, it's crucial to show compassion to people. God did the same, Jesus said. God gave manna to people in the wilderness, and we all need to do the same. We need to feed hungry people. But they ate it, Jesus said, and they still died. There's more to life. There's more to what I'm all about than just feeding and filling people's tummies. There is more to eating bread than just physical sustenance. I remember one of the greatest communion experiences of my life. It was a busy time. I went to a senior's residence, and as I often met this man, his name was Duncan McFarlane, just a wonderful, wonderful human being. This was over in Guelph. And every time I went to visit Duncan, I would go up to his room, and he would say, no, Marty, we need to go down into the dining hall. And he would take me down into the dining hall, and immediately we would go up to the counter there, and he would say, Marty, what would you like? My treat, he always bought a coffee. Would you like a cookie? Would you like a muffin? Would you like a piece of cake? No, Duncan, no, you need to have something, Marty. Would you like a cookie? Would you like a piece of cake? Would you like a muffin? And so I would say, sure, I'd love a muffin. And then he would get one, and then he would look around. He would always look around. Just wait for it. And he would go over, and he would bring somebody else that he knew, and he would have them sit at our table, introduce me, and we would have our coffee, and we would have our muffin together. And I'm telling you that it was a powerful experience of communion, of the living bread. Where was Jesus in all of that? In every bite that we took, in every sip that we drank, there was Jesus. There is something much more powerful about bread than just filling our tummies. Contemporary theologian Angel Francisco Mendez Montoya, in a recent article, says the following: bread is given to satisfy not only material hunger, but also to respond to emotional, political, and spiritual hunger. Bread expresses a deep desire for connectedness, for relationships, a desire for the holy, for the other. I am the living bread, Jesus said. Eat the bread that I give you, and you will live forever. You will never die. The bread that I give you is my flesh. Bread is not just bread, Jesus is saying. Sharing bread is a deeply human and spiritual experience that connects us to each other and connects us to God. As Christians, we're not expected to be able to understand everything about life, about God, about faith, about the Bible, about Jesus. But as Christians, we're called to follow the one we call Jesus, to imitate him. So the next time someone offers to break bread with you, or the next time someone says to you, can we go and have a coffee together? I invite you to see in the bread broken, to see in the cup shared, and experience a deep experience of the mysterious presence of God in our lives. Such is the beautiful imagination of Jesus, who sees a world in which all are fed, a worldwide community of people in deep relationship. Bread, as the feeding of the 5,000 teaches, is not just about filling tummies. Bread is about building community and finding incredible connection. Bread is an experience of the holy. Thanks be to God. Amen.